Welcome to the edge of the galaxy, the frontier of space. Well, at least it was until the corporations bought it, branded it, and started selling it at ludicrously inflated prices.
As I've been journeying through 2019's first-person action role-playing game, The Outer Worlds by Obsidian Entertainment, I found the narrative design incredibly engaging. I'm often looking for games that celebrate strong storytelling while honoring the craft of excellent fiction writing. In fact, I learned several new words while playing this modern RPG classic. So I jotted down any word that sounded unfamiliar or any term that required an official definition for me to get a firm grasp on how it's used. Throughout my playthrough of the base game, I came up with 11 terms that I thought I'd share with you. If you haven't played The Outer Worlds or the DLC, fear not. These terms do not contain any spoilers. As a classic creative type, I suffer from a bit of attention deficit. And so I found that I actively have to write stuff down as I'm playing to keep track of all my notes, and key terms help me stay engaged in the narrative. Looking back on my notes for The Outer Worlds, as I've been kind of planning my coverage for The Outer Worlds in anticipation of Avowed and the sequel to the first Outer Worlds 2, it made me realize that Obsidian Entertainment is not afraid of flexing on us with some really cool words. One of the joys of running the Yeti Den is the fact that I get to appreciate the excellent work that goes into a beloved game's development. With that being said, the team at Obsidian is clearly at the top of their craft when it comes to designing well-written stories, strong characters, and interesting dialogue. I've listened to several GDC talks and podcast interviews from the development team at Obsidian Entertainment, and in a way, I've really tried to absorb their methodology for creative writing. A great example would be Tim Cain's rule of never introducing a punchline that exclusively requires the player to have any outside knowledge of a pop culture reference to understand the joke.
I think it's pretty obvious, if you've played a lot of my games, that I try to put humor in all of them. Some of them are obviously humorous. I mean, Outer Worlds wore its humor on its sleeve. Whether you're making storyline, dialogue, item descriptions, found lore, having some humor in a game helps provide relief to the player, make the dark parts of the game seem darker in contrast, and also makes a game fun.
Timothy Cain co-directed The Outer Worlds with Leonard Boyarsky. And if those names sound familiar, then you might be aware of their legendary status in game development. As a team, they've worked on Fallout, Arcanum of Steamworks, and Magic Obscura, and Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. Well-written, well-designed RPGs are kind of their calling card. Boyarsky served as a co-director and narrative design lead for The Outer Worlds, with writers Carrie Patel, Paul Kirsch, Natey Podar, and Kate Dolliard, to name a few. With this list of words, I'm hoping to improve my own writing as a creative director, writer, and most importantly, an occasional dungeon master. If you're like me and you like to absorb the writing and dialogue in role-playing games in order to learn new ways of expanding your vocabulary, then let's nerd out together. Diving into our 11 words from The Outer Worlds, the first word on our list is Forfend. Forfend is a word that I had never heard prior to playing The Outer Worlds. It's words like forfend that stop me in my tracks while I am playing, causing me to jot it down in my game notes. I'd love to be able to drop this one casually in a conversation or write it down into a D&D campaign, because I feel like it's a showstopper of a word. Forfend, it just rolls off the tongue, yet it also is awkward to say. So here's the definition of forfend. Forfend: avert, keep away, or prevent something evil or unpleasant. When you think about the word forfend in the context of The Outer Worlds, I can totally see how that word itself not only serves the role of bringing back vocabulary that paints a picture of Western pioneering society while describing the evil and unpleasant situation that the colonies in Halcyon face every single day. So it's a great word that makes sense in the context of the fiction that surrounds it. Number 2, vapid, offering nothing that is stimulating or challenging. Word number 2 is conversational and recognizable to my ear. The word vapid is a good podcast word. I think of podcast words as words that make you sound smart. Good podcast words aren't so distracting that they disrupt the flow of a conversation, but they are flashy enough to assuage the listener's evaluation on whether a podcast host is intelligent or not. Common podcast words are zeitgeist, convoluted, ethereal, and etymology. You sneak those into a conversation and your fellow podcaster won't say, hey, wait a minute, what is that word? Why are you using that fancy word out of nowhere? So we'll add Vapid to a list of words that we can say in conversation without getting teased for expanding our vocabulary too rapidly. Because it's a small word, remember, you want to keep those syllables down as to not get made fun of for talking too good. You've got to ease into a more evolved linguistic sophistication. Where the dialogue of the Outer Worlds succeeds is in its representation of the game's characters and how those characters express their shared language. This creates a common culture which coincides with the game's immersive world narrative. The NPCs of Halcyon express authentic motivations, grounding the fiction of their feelings towards each other. When party member Parvati confesses her deepest thoughts and emotions to me, I not only believe her, but I can understand how her past experience may have led her to that specific emotional outcome. So one character calling another character vapid is a great example of the type of interactions I like to see inside of an RPG's conversational dialogue. In other words, these NPCs aren't just saying, go find my son in a cave and I'll give you some loot. In the Outer Worlds, the NPCs have a bit fresher of a perspective and a deeper identity that really shines through in the dialogue. Number 3, capricious, given to sudden and unaccountable changes of mood or behavior. Capricious or capriciousness is a fun word. It reminds me of Capri salad. I love Italian food. Mo makes incredible pizza, homemade pasta, and lasagna. So anything that reminds me of that country and its culture brings me immense joy. So capriciousness is going straight into my daily lexicon. I could definitely see this being a valuable word to use because it's gossipy and nobody wants to be viewed as having a lot of capriciousness. You know, I might call that moody. No one wants to be moody. And since I didn't write down who said it and who they were calling capricious, I can only think of maybe Phineas Vernon Wells.
Wondering what's going on, eh? One question first. Are you feeling anything that can be construed as explosive cell death? No? Wonderful. Let's get started.
He plays an important role in the story and is often portrayed as a finicky, unreliable source of information. But then again, he's not so moody. There is another character earlier on in the game. I could see a board member lobbing an insult at her as being capricious.
I can't say I blame you. Reed is positively soporific.
But moving on. Number 4, Odious.
Plague? Ah, shit. I had some of this salt tuna.
Extremely unpleasant and repulsive. Odious, it feels pretty self-explanatory. Odious sounds bad, right? It doesn't sound like the word implies anything bright or cheery. I mean, there are many odious elements of the Outer Worlds board-approved corporate colonial experiment. Without giving away any spoilers, I'd say Terra 2's Salt Tuna Factory is pretty damn odious. Maybe Monarch's C&B Borst Factory also pretty odious. Like, how delicious can canned cysty pig, borst wurst, or borst in baked beans truly be? If I ever find myself in the misfortune of inhabiting the Halcyon colony, I imagine I'd be smelling plenty of odious smells and missing Mo's organic, handmade Italian cooking. On to the next word. Number 5, perfidious. Perfidious is another fun word to say aloud. Perfidious really rolls off the tongue in a Mary Poppins British kind of way. But ironically, again, this isn't bright or cherry or even spunky. It actually means deceitful and untrustworthy. Can I think of any perfidious people in the Halcyon colony? You know what? I kind of think that I can. With the corporations of the Outer Worlds running the colonies straight into the ground, I could see how a word like perfidious might be useful in describing Spacer's Choice and their cohorts. Number 6, curative. Able to cure disease. The Outer Worlds team had a lot of fun crafting the food, drinks, and medicines of their world, and I think that really shows in the way that they build such extensive lore behind Auntie Cleo's and Spacer's Choice, to name a few of those corporate brands and products of the Halcyon colony. There's an entire DLC dedicated to the origin story of some of the bad R&D that the board goes through to create pretty terrible curative and lucrative solutions to the workers' plight. Number 7, verisimilitude, the appearance of being true or real. Imagine being the voice actor having to read that line, verisimilitude. I feel like I'm in AP Euro or Gov or US history because this is one of those key terms that really represents the whole mood of an era. Verisimilitude, meaning the appearance of being true or real, is such a specific word that exactly matches the tone of the game's sarcastic, sardonic approach to capitalism. The board appears to be telling the truth, but we all know they are not, and many elements of the great experiment of Halcyon are entirely falsified to create an illusion of success. Number 8, Contrapposto, an asymmetrical arrangement of the human figure in which the line of the arms and shoulders contrasts with while balancing those of hips and legs. This one is particularly tricky, but if you look up a photo, it'll make sense. Think the David. Moving on. Number 9. This one is a little simpler of a word, decorum, which means behavior in keeping with good taste and propriety. This is another example of a word that I know of, but never use in my day-to-day vernacular. I think decorum is a great simple word, perfect for sneaking in a brand new word into an everyday conversation. It's a nice palate cleanser, maybe a podcast word. Number 10, subterfuge, deceit used in order to achieve one's goal. I think of espionage, World War II, and the Cold War. Subterfuge just seems ominous and intriguing, so it's like putting yourself first, even if you have to deceive a few people on your climb to the top, which if you've played an Obsidian game before, you may have partaken in a little subterfuge along the way. 11, Sawbones, a doctor or surgeon. This is a cool word because it again paints that picture of the American pioneer town of the late 1800s. Droves of Americans moved out west, started up new towns, and required the service of a sawbones to chop off a limb or give you a good home remedy like Coca-Cola with real Coke. The idea of a local sawbones conjures a film reference to Alan Tudyk's veterinarian in 3:10 to Yuma. After all, Tudyk himself is a veteran actor hailing from the beloved cult classic Firefly, which inspired the Outer Worlds elevator pitch, Fallout meets Firefly. Wordsmith.com describes the etymology of the term sawbones as stemming from informal Old English origins, with its earliest documented use in 1837. Earlier in the game, you'll meet the Spacer's Choice certified surgeon of Edgewater, Conrad Sadek. He's also a barber, so there's that. Those are our 11 words from the Outer Worlds. A refined lexicon of a video game's world can enhance the immersion of storytelling while drawing players deeper into its narrative. I mean, we all remember the Skyrim NPC who took an arrow to the knee. The phrases, the words, they all matter and they all stick with us. I can still very clearly hear the NPC from Morrowind telling me emphatically, "Now you die!" The Outer Worlds has its own unique voice, and the team's choice of words always fascinate me. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what games you'd consider as the most well-written. Is there a specific game that has exposed you to interesting words? That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been the Yeti Den, and I will see you all next time. Bye.